Hi everybody, Cerebra Sana in Paris. I'm sure you've been wondering whether or not I was going to comment on the French presidential elections, which took place yesterday, and obviously the answer is yes. And what you've got on the screen at the moment is, you see this EM with the exclamation point. This was the abbreviated version of his campaign slogan, which was En Marche, which loosely translates to let's turn the machine on, right? The machine is running. But the EM was also obviously a reference to his name, Emmanuel Macron. So I just took the EM with the exclamation point and I just turned it into "Eh merde," because that's what I feel about this this quote-unquote victory. Now, obviously, I was no fan of Marine Le Pen. If you've been following my channel for at least a month, you know that I was not for her. And the trouble we had with this election was, as I've been saying and I've been tweeting this, it's how do you choose between horrible dressed as a man and horrible dressed as a woman? And, you know, that's really what we were up against. So while I was watching the coverage last night, I was watching it on one of my other computers, and this was what I saw when I last left that computer. The results, it says incomplete results calculated on the base of 90% of registered voters received. And you've got the statistics here. Then when I got up this morning and I, just wanted to check in, this is what I saw. This was for all of France, incomplete results calculated on the base of 99.99% of registered voters received. So I analyzed this data because there are people who are screaming an incredible historic victory, 66% of the vote, he's won, 2/3 of France is behind him, and that's not true. And I'll show you why in a second. But the first thing I wanted to point out is, what is this? This is not the page. This is a screen capture of the page, because when I came back to my screen and refreshed the page, this is what I saw. Right, this is what I saw. So it's for all of France. Here is the results of the second round, and it's final. So you don't have that red. You don't have that red warning at the top. So this is 100% of all of the results for France. And curiously, they're not even mentioning the people in other parts. The French people who live abroad. There's even no reference to them this time, as opposed to last time. They had asterisks and they included them. So I'm not so concerned about that right now. What is really what I wanted to point out to you immediately is something that is quite unusual. And I'm no math genius, but I can see something that looks weird right off the bat, which I will show you. So as I said, this is where I was a few hours ago before the page refreshed, with 99.99% of the votes having been counted. And when they make it all the way up, I should point out that this is the website of the Interior Ministry. You can see right here, right? This is the official government page. This means that every precinct, every department, every polling station has already gone through the process of counting and tabulating all of their votes, and we do it by hand, and set them up to the ministry. Right, so they can get incorporated into this page. I perhaps mentioned it in my previous videos on this. I went back and I counted for my little precinct where I live. So I actually have participated in this, and this wasn't my first time either, of how this process happened. And they have people verifying, and there's people who verify the people who verified. So at least at my little plebeian level, I've seen how the process works. And we even had people for the first round where one of the tables, the numbers didn't jibe, and they had to go and redo the whole thing again until the numbers were correct. So I do know that there is a human element involved, at least trying to do this properly and honestly. And then everything gets put into these envelopes and they get sent up to the government, and then they eventually make it into this official page. Like I said, this is the official page with the final results. And what I wanted to point out to you is, I will just show you that we've got a total number of registered voters at 47,568,588. Okay. Now, when I was looking at this with 99.99% of the results in, we had a total of 47,448,929 registered voters. So that makes a difference of, if I get my little handy calculator up just to show you, I will do this with you live. If we just go and we get the total number of voters, registered voters, right? That's 47,568,588 voters. And we subtract 47,448,929 voters. That gives us a difference of almost 120,000 people. Now, my first question is, how is that even possible? Because you know the total number of registered voters months in advance of the election, because there's a cutoff date. At a certain point, you can no longer register. So all of that information is tabulated officially somewhere, and then they close the door and they say, okay, done. This is the total amount of registered voters for this year. So I'm just curious as to how, with 99.99% voting, with the information received, and even at that, even if it was 20% of the results having been tabulated, those numbers should be the same. Right? Now, if somebody out there has more information and can explain this to me, why there's this difference, I'm all ears. I would love to know, because as far as I'm concerned, you can only register up to a certain point, as I just said, and then you're done. So that means there's an official list somewhere of everybody who signed up before the deadline. So there's no reason why this official website should be showing anything but the official number, total number, from the beginning of the counting. All right, so that's my first, anomaly that I'm sort of pointing out to you. And then the second anomaly is, as I said, when I got up this morning and I started looking at this version of the results, this number represented the people that had voted with a null and void vote. Let me just explain. You've got abstentions, right? Those are the people who just stay home and say, screw it, I'm not participating. I'm registered, but I'm not going to go. Those are the abstentions. Then you've got the people who vote blanc, which means you show up, but you don't put anybody's name in the envelope. The envelope is empty. So that's considered a vote blanc. Okay, you've made the gesture to say, I don't like either one of them. And then the vote that is null and void means you've done something, you've put something in the envelope that's not legitimate, that's not legal, so it can't be counted. So your vote is considered null and void. All right, so that's kind of what I did. Okay, I put somebody else's name in the envelope that I thought should have won. And I know that I'm not the only one who did that. So anyway, so those are the ways that you can vote. You can stay home and say screw it, or you can show up and vote for nobody, or you can do something a little out of the ordinary and still get discounted, and that's your way of expressing yourself. Okay, so I wanted to point out that the people who had the null and void votes with 99.99% of everything counted was 1,060,696. And then when we get the final tally, here's the final tally, we went down to 1,049,532 people. All right, so let's get up the little calculator again. So we went from, where are my notes here? We went from, the final tally is 1,049,532 minus 1,060,696. So how did we lose 11,164 null and void votes? Okay, now I'm going to remind you that once the votes get all the way up to the ministry, they're not recounted, right? These are the finals signed and sealed and delivered and validated locally. They don't get recounted. at least to my knowledge. So if someone can correct me on this, for me, they just collate all the they just combine all the information together. They don't recount them. All right. So how do you lose 11,164 null and void votes? All right. Now, if we take a look at the empty ones, we had 3,019,724. Right. So now, if we want to go and subtract out the difference there, we get minus 3,006,106, right? So we went up 13,618 votes. The abstentions also went up, but you know, that's fine. But what I'm just not getting is, how do you lose null and void votes? That doesn't make sense to me. But then the biggest thing that I really, really wanted to point out to you guys is we just have to not listen to what the media is parroting, because how many people are going to actually tell you what that 66% means? He didn't win 66% of the vote. He actually won he won less than half of the voters, right? He won 43%. Now, how did they get that number? It's quite simply that you take the total number of people who were registered, right? You take out the people who didn't come out to vote, which was like 25%. So a quarter, 25% of registered French voters said, I'm not going to choose either. Okay, so then that means you're left with 35,407,616 voters, of whom a little over 3 million voted for nobody, and then a little over 1 million voted for somebody else or did something that was considered null and void. So you delete those which don't really count, and you end up with 31,340,814 actual valid votes that were cast. Okay, so that's how you end up with, let's just do the math. Right, we'll go get the final numbers here. So if we go and we take the final numbers, we get 20,753,798 times 100 divided by the total number of people who actually cast a valid vote, 397,916, right? And that's how you end up with 66.1% of the people who cast a vote. But the people who only cast a vote represent only 2/3 of the French voters, right? So it's much more interesting to calculate how many votes he actually got from registered voters. So if we just do this again, times 100 divided by the total number of people who registered, that's how you end up with this 43.63%. Right, so less than half of registered voters wanted this guy in. So he is by no means this, being heralded as, oh, this great victory. No, 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 and no. He has a major battle ahead of him, because the legislative elections are coming up, and that's where the other parties can put their people into the General Assembly and all that stuff, and that's where you pass the laws. So this guy is going to have have a challenge if he can't get his little troops in order. However, are we really worried about him getting his little troops in order? I sincerely doubt it, because this guy, has come out of nowhere, or has he? He has come out of nowhere in the sense that he has never held an elected office. However, he's been the little promising upstart, shall we say, in the banking spheres, right? He's been to Bilderberg, this guy. So I just wanted to show you a couple of things. I went back in history to just show you what happened with him, because you can go in Google and change the dates, right? So I wanted to see what people were saying about him when he was first appointed a minister in François Hollande's government. Now, let's not forget that Hollande came in with grand promises, and he was the socialist president, and we were going to get things back in order, and and that all went out the window. Okay, we have more unemployment, we have crises at every turn. We just have a horrible mess here at the moment for all sorts of reasons. So the first thing I did was I called up the results of when he was first appointed into the government. Okay, and I'll tell you about this website in a second. Okay, so this says the men and women of the president, and this is dated May 15 of 2012. So this is right after, he took office. So if we go down to Emmanuel Macron, he's dubbed the banker, right? Now, what's really ironic in this, and really does sort of show how you can have a nice story that you tell the people, and then once you get in, then the whole story just changes. One of Hollande's big remarks made during his campaign was he came out and said, finance is my enemy, right? The world of finance, the bankers are my enemy, he said. So this is the reference, this quote, my adversary. It was finance, right? Was what he said. It says on January 22nd, last January 22nd. Mind you, we're in 2012, right? So they're referencing January of 2012. So it says, okay, he can come out and call the finance his adversary, but it didn't stop him from choosing to have himself assisted by a young professional banker, right? Un banquier d'affaires is these people who do these big deals, right? Who do, I don't know how you'd say banquier d'affaires, but he's up there. He worked for the Rothschilds, okay? So they're saying, oh, at 34 years old, he's becoming Deputy Secretary General. Okay, and he's supposed to be in charge of economic questions and financial regulation. Okay, this is what he was put in charge of. Okay, and it says that he was previously a finance inspector, right? And then he went and worked in the private sector in 2007. After 4 years of being a finance inspector, right? So this is like how they say the wolf guarding the hen house, right? Where he didn't just work for the Rothschilds. He became an associate, right? A managing associate. This little pipsqueak, Baby Bilderberg, had quite a juicy role with the Rothschilds, okay? It says here that according to the Tribune, he is, quote, one of the rising stars of the serious bankers, right? The banques d'affaires, these commercial banks, okay? And it says that he was a member of the Attali Commission, which I'll tell you about this little footnote in a second, but this was a horrible report that came out that was supposedly commissioned on how we're going to improve the economy. And it had all sorts of measures that, of course, are going to benefit the people who, wheel and deal with these millions and billions and trillions of dollars. And the poor guy, just trying to put food on his table and keep a roof over his head. They're kind of like absent from the whole process here. So little pipsqueak EM, the banker, comes out of nowhere. Well, no, he had participated in this Attali Commission on growth, right? Liberating growth. And liberating growth just means let's make it even more possible for people to make even more money, okay? And not us that are making the money. So now this little asterisk here, when we go down to the bottom, it just turns out that, oh, by the way, who is one of the founding shareholders of this quote-unquote news website? Well, here he is. Okay, so this is just showing you this how and this article is obviously slanted because, as I said, there are many criticisms about this famous report, freeing up growth and all of that stuff. There was a lot of criticism, and still is. And so this guy was participating in that. All right, so he's never held elected office, but he's been swimming in these dirty financial waters for a long time. All right, so here he is again. This is another article from 2012 where they're just talking about who this guy is, and here he is. He's referred to as the banker and finance inspector. Okay, so then what happened was when Hollande first took office, he named as prime minister Jean-Marc Ayrault, and that didn't last. That lasted for 2 years, and then he got rid of Ayrault and he brought in the evil devil incarnate. Manuel Valls came in. Okay, and Manuel Valls, everyone was like, he's just a guy from the right dressed up in left's clothes, right? Because he's in a leftist government, but all his measures and everything he was doing was like helping the right. So we didn't really like him, and there's many other reasons why we didn't like him. The guy spent zillions of dollars on focus grouping his image. It's crazy. But when he came into office, it was up to him to go and create his new ministers, and they did some musical chairs and whatnot. And guess who got the nod again? So Macron came back into this government with Valls, and this is in 2014. All right, you see right here, the date is August of 2014 was when they did the new remaniement, as they say. They did the musical chairs and they changed the ministers around, and he came back. All right. So he came back, and as you see here, Valls nominating Macron is heralded by the right and, big business owners. And absolutely décrié is like, oh my God, on the gauche, on the left, right? So it says this young, énarque means he came out of a prestigious business school, right? So it's like almost saying this young guy who came out of Yale or Harvard Business or whatever it is. It's an énarque. He came out of the École Nationale d'Administration, which is where all of these figurehead, wheeler dealers come out of. So it says this young énarque, former banker at the Rothschilds, has been named Minister of the Economy and the Industry. Okay, so here he is. Again, never having held any sort of elected office. So he's just being appointed left and right. All right, so now he's 36 years old, and now he's in charge of the economy and industry in this new government. So this is August of 2014. So what I'm trying to show you is his quote-unquote evolution is quite interesting, because in 2014, what else did he do in 2014? He attended Bilderberg. Okay, and we can just do a quick search. There he is. Okay, now this is calling him Deputy Secretary General of the Presidency. So this is while he's still doing his tour as Hollande's first group, right under Jean-Marc Ayrault. Right, so this meeting took place at the end, late May, early June. 2 months after this meeting, we have a new prime minister. It's Manuel Valls, who nobody likes, and who people are going to continue to strongly dislike. 2 months later, he's back again in charge of the economy and industry. So to give you a little more perspective on this, this is an article from, as you see, from September of 2014. So he's just joined a month earlier the second government headed up by Emmanuel Valls, and it says here that Macron imposes reform, like forcing reform on the chambers of commerce, okay, to the point that they decided to call for a strike against his measures. All right, so he instantly comes out of as soon as he gets into a position of power, he's trying to put in place these measures that are really against the average worker, and everything was in favor of big business. And such as right here, one of the things he wanted to push through was that you could be fired if you refused to be mutated somewhere, right? They tell you, okay, we're going to ship you off to someplace else, and you refuse, you would be fired for that. So that's just one little example. But he was pushing through reforms that were totally out of line with what a socialist government would represent theoretically, if you believe, socialists are supposed to be more in tune with the average, the life of average people. And the right tends to attract more people who are rich, the people who are, out for conserving their wealth and making more wealth. So if you believe in that sort of dichotomy, well, this guy is parading around in a leftist government doing things that the right would be doing normally. And that was the same problem we had with Valls, that he just was perceived, and it's not even just a perception problem. The measures that he was putting into place were very right oriented, shall we say. But what I thought was even the most interesting of the things that I uncovered here is this article from September 2015. Okay, so this is 1 year after this, almost to the day. It says, for Emmanuel Macron, being elected is, quote, the path from another time, right? The way you did it in olden days, right, is what he's saying. So this is Manuel Valls, right, and this is Emmanuel Macron, and he's criticizing the fact that you can be elected, meaning being elected is so has been, right? So remember, we're in September of 2015, and it says, asked if he would be running in the legislative elections of 2017. In the legislative elections of 2017, the economy minister said on Sunday that being elected is what you did in olden times. Right? And that is kind of shocking when you think about it. Why would he come out and say something like that in September of 2015? No, he has no plans to run in the legislative elections, right? Running for office? That so has been, right? You don't run for office. Why would he say something like that? Well, obviously because he knew what was coming down the pike, so to speak. All right? So he just says, a lot of people say that. They say that, to be in political life, you have to be first a deputy, a representative, but that's how it was before, in ancient times, in former times. Okay? So it says, in other words, Emmanuel Macron feels that it is not necessary to have to put yourself up to face the vote of the people before you can hold high office. Okay? So, in perspective, this is really, really revealing. The arrogance that this guy has and the confidence that he can just go and do this in 2015, because these things are planned out, obviously. They don't just decide overnight, okay, well, we'll just do this and tomorrow it'll be good. They plan all this stuff out. So this article really was a big eye-opener for me. In September of 2015, they're asking him if he would consider running for a legislative election, meaning he gets elected to be a representative and sit in the Assembly Générale and participate in the process. And he's saying, no way, he won't do that because it's so old school. Then what happens is he leaves, right? August of 2016, which is fairly recent, he just quits the government to start, as it says here, a new phase in his combat. All right? And it says he wants to devote himself entirely to his political movement, En Marche. All right? So that was August 30th of 2016. So it's not even 1 year ago. This guy comes out of nowhere, politically speaking, and now he's president of France. All right? So I just want everyone to realize how the wheeling and the dealing is going on despite us. I mean, people who follow my channel know that there's obviously forces behind the scenes that run these things, but this is a classic example of what's going on. This guy has never held any sort of public office. He leaves the government to go do his own thing just months from the next presidential election, and then he gets elected. This is crazy. And he gets elected against who? Against, you know, this party that has been fighting to get into higher positions of power for a long time. It has made inroads with the French people, because not everything Marine Le Pen has said is stupid. Some of her ideas do make sense in a certain light, okay? But there is a stigma attached to the Front National, and for good reason. And so by having her be the one that's up against Pipsqueak, Baby Bilderberg, it really made it such a no-brainer that he would have to win. Okay, whether or not they're manipulating votes behind the scenes or not, it was a no-brainer. And this is how we got Chirac into office in 2002, when it was Le Pen's father who had managed to make it to the second round. And everyone was so like, oh God, we can't have the Front National. And back then their image was a lot worse than what it is now. Marine Le Pen has softened the edges to a certain extent. But nonetheless, she does have, you know, quite radical ideas that I certainly don't support. All right, so what this article is pointing out here, it's just sort of retracing his history within the government, and he's saying he's leaving the government because he wants to be free to speak and propose and to act, right? Because he's not free to do these things while he's in the government. So he's going to go and leave and do all of this stuff on his own, all by himself. And it also points out how, again, you know, former banker from the Rothschilds, associated with the Rothschilds, he got laws passed while he was working with Hollande. He got laws passed. How? By using the 49.3, right? By executive order, because his what he was proposing was not desired. So he had to force this thing. So we've got the Loi Macron, you know, it's his name on it, but it wasn't even something that people liked, right? It had to be voted in, not even voted in, it had to be enforced by executive order. So this is just telling you, you know, what was going on, that he was in there to push things into a certain direction, and he was doing it. And he knows he's backed by the most powerful forces in the world. The fact that you haven't been elected really means nothing. That you don't have to be elected to be able to move up the ranks in the political world. He actually says that, right? And he's saying it because he knows it. And now, then he gets the nod, you know, that because it says in this article that he's, without mentioning a run for the presidency in 2017, right? Right here, without officially saying that he will be a candidate in 2017, right? This is August of 2016, and we just voted in May of 2017. So this is to show you how fast this guy just came out of the starting blocks, and now he's president. Going back to this Slate magazine, it started in the States, and then they created in 2009 a French version, okay? But this gentleman is a Bilderberger. A Bilderberger, all right? And this is just a clip where he's openly calling for New World Order, that the only way you can have, you know, a better economy is with a one world government. So, I mean, I'll leave you the clip if you want to go watch it. But you know, this Macron guy we should actually be calling him Macroni. He's a crony. He's 38 years old or 39 years old now, and he's rotten to the core already. All right. So, so that's really basically, it's a bit of a rant, and I'm sorry for that, but there's just a lot of stuff that's disturbing about this quote-unquote win, and it will remain to be seen whether or not he will actually be able to govern, because he still needs support, unless he's just going to live with the 49.3 for the rest of his days as president to get things done. So this is what we had last night. He chose to make his speech in front of the Louvre pyramid. And this is what what they kept showing. They had, several cameras, but this was the main camera shooting this guy in front of the pyramid. I mean, I was watching this just thinking to myself, oh, they must be just smiling and clinking glasses and high-fiving each other and just saying, this is so great, right? To have the symbolism of this guy obviously catapulted into this position, despite what we would have wanted, right? The fact that he's up against Le Pen, this is another aspect of this quote-unquote win, is a lot of the people who actually did go and vote. Remember, we were looking at the numbers, right? When you look at the numbers, the people who did vote for him, right, out of these 20 million people, there's a vast majority of them who just didn't want Marine Le Pen to win, right? So he's all, feeling high and mighty because, he's got 66% of the votes and isn't this great? And this is, he was really voted in like a landslide victory, right? No landslide victory. No, and no, and no. So yes, he won, but he's won by default. And I'm sure to a certain extent that was orchestrated, right? Because had he gone up against someone like Mélenchon, who did have a real program, that if you took the time to read it, as I said earlier, read it, listen to his speeches, do your research, if this was about making France a better place for French people, the people living here, not the people making money off our backs, then it would have been a difficult battle for Mr. Macron because he's not well liked by regular people. There was the big comment made that, he's got young people are behind him. Young people are behind him. Right. And the young people behind him want to work in big data. And the young people behind Mélenchon want to work on alternative energy solutions and helping little startups and help cooperating with our European, friends and partners here in Europe instead of competition, right? This is all about liberating growth and fostering competition and making... No. We don't want his policies. So again, this will be very interesting to follow. The legislative elections are coming up in June, so I will be following that for you. And and the last thing was this, information at the last minute that Macron had offshore accounts and all sorts of crazy stuff going on there. But it came out too late because there's a moratorium. You can't reveal anything new that could possibly change people's ideas 48 hours before the actual elections, right? So anything that was coming out, nobody could officially talk about it. And I did go and try to get the information that was circulating around. And by the time I got to the list of the links, they had all been taken down except 2. And the 2 that I was able to access had nothing extremely incriminating in it. But they had obviously cleaned the slates rather quickly once the stuff started getting out. So when you see that right there, if it was fake news and if it was completely fabricated, why do you go and wipe off the servers the information? So it's kind of this back-assed way of trying to deal with a problem by erasing the problem. They don't realize that that's only reinforcing what people were trying to say, that this guy, look at the world he comes from. He comes from a world where these people make billions by moving these little percentage points of figures around the planet, and it translates into phenomenal amounts of money. So he's no stranger to any of this. So I can't confirm or infirm, but I wouldn't put it past him that he's doing some finagling with his money. So on that lovely note, I will leave you all, and I would like to hear your comments. And as usual, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and Cerebra Sana from Paris signing off. Bye everybody.